is Audrey Gordon for Sunrise Sunset, the Jewish Family in Transition. My guest today is Dr. Carl Scheinder, the Director, Coordinator of the Divorce Mediation Service of the Pastoral Psychotherapy Institute of Parkside Human Services, a division of Lutheran General Medical Corporation here in Des Plaines, Illinois. Today we're going to talk about divorce mediation and what that means and why is it different than other kinds of divorce proceedings. Welcome, Carl.
Thanks, Audrey.
What is divorce mediation?
Well, divorce mediation is a new option that has emerged in the last couple of years for folks who are facing divorce as a way to work out the settlement that they need to work out in order to be divorced, as an alternative to going through the adversarial process connected with the courts.
Well, when you talk about settlement, is it just money, property, things like that that people should be concerned about?
No. Every divorce has the same set of basics that have to be worked out one way or another, and they include property, and then if also there are children, you're working with issues of what's going to happen with parenting and also what's going to happen with maintenance and support. And those are the core issues in every divorce.
Well, is this just a legal thing that you're doing? Is this something that people who are having just legal problems should avail themselves of?
It's not a legal thing in the sense that we do not ourselves practice law, and when folks come to us, let me explain what happens. If folks who are facing a divorce decide they would like to consider mediation rather than each go out and get separate attorneys and work things out that way, what they do is they contact us, and for instance at our service, the Divorce Mediation Service, folks would call me on the phone, we would arrange an appointment, see them together, and then over a series of sessions, we say that normally runs to about 8 sessions in which we'd see people weekly for an hour, and we would work with them together to work out all the issues involved in settling their divorce. At the end of that, what we do is we draw up a letter of agreement that outlines what it is that are the agreements they have reached, and those in turn are then given to an attorney, formalized, and become part of the divorce settlement.
You're a psychologist, you're not a lawyer.
That's right.
What is it that you do as a psychologist? You're also a pastoral counselor. What is it that you do in these modes that would be different than what someone else might do?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I work, I work at a counseling center in which I do therapy, and when I work as a pastoral counselor and psychologist, I'm doing therapy. When I do mediation, I'm working with a different hat on, and I am a mediator. Some of our mediators happen to be attorneys as background in their background. They also work not as attorneys, but as mediators. In fact, at the Divorce Mediation Service, we normally work in co-mediation teams. One of the mediators with a legal background, one with a clinical background. And what happens in that mode is we are clearly not doing, for instance, therapy with people. We assume when people come to us that they have done whatever counseling and whatever sorting out they need to do and have gotten to the place where they've decided for whatever reasons there's going to be a divorce. They may not want it, they may not like it, but they have decided that indeed they are moving toward divorce. That is the point at which we enter, and this is a fairly task-oriented process in which we're working toward a goal to help folks work out a settlement so they can move from being one kind of family into a reorganized kind of unit that divorce involves.
Let's clarify that. In other words, people who are thinking about a divorce but aren't sure about it are not ready for divorce mediation service.
That's right.
This is not an attempt to save a marriage. It does not provide marital counseling. It is something for people who have decided firmly that what they want is a divorce.
That's right.
Does it ever happen that people change their minds?
No, it does occasionally, or sometimes. I think one of the things that's helpful about the mediation process is we work with people on a lot of, with a number of things that I think don't happen when folks go to see separate attorneys. I think there are a lot of concerned and helpful attorneys out there, but I think the process of going to see separate attorneys means that when people go to work out their divorce, in many ways they stop talking to each other, and at that point part of what happens is a lot of difficulties arise. People get afraid, they get angry, they don't know what's going on, And mediation has people sit down and work together. One of the things, for instance, that we work together on is budgeting and concretely working out what together they have to be able to move into the future with and what they each need. And I think it's a very helpful way of grounding the kinds of fears and...
kind of laying it out in front of them, dollars and cents, this is what's realistically going to happen?
We put up a flipboard, we send them home with budget sheets, they come in with the figures of their assets and their income and the figures that they spend for everything, right on down to the newspaper and toiletries, on through rent, and we look at that because part of the thing that's interesting is in our experience, often by the time people reach divorce, they are significantly in debt, and it isn't that one person or the other has the money, but in fact, if they don't sit down and look at it together, I think the agreements they reach are often undone because people begin to feel, hey, I don't have any money, he must have it. I don't have it. He's running off with it all, or she's got it all with the kids. And it sets up a situation that often lays the seeds for some resentment and not honoring of agreements later on down the line. When we work together, folks can often face that they both have participated in getting into a situation in which they're in debt, or they both really need to work together to come up with additional money in order to be able to get through. And they can see it in some ways as something they do need to cooperate on, rather than trying to take from each other what they don't have.
Is it usual for people who have used the mediation service to then use a single attorney because most of the groundwork has been done?
In some states that happens. In Illinois, the bar has urged strongly that each party has an attorney, and we encourage people to each consult with an attorney in going through mediation. That way, part of I think what is the value of mediation is it really is an opportunity for people to work out their own decisions. That means not only does the judge not make a decision for you, but even your attorneys, as concerned as they are for you, don't make the decision. And we as mediators don't. We're there to help people identify themselves what they want and to choose that. We believe people got into the situation they're in, they had children, bought a house by themselves, and they can, with help, work out a settlement that probably is more finely tuned than any of the rest of us, whatever we know, could work out. But that does mean that people make informed decisions. And what we do, therefore, is really encourage that people have some sense, in effect, of the ballpark, the arena in which the options that they have in terms of making decisions after consulting an attorney, then they can work out their own agreement.
You tend to get a self-selecting population. I'm thinking about divorces that are particularly bitter, people who can't talk with one another because somebody's picked up and moved out. It seems to me there's a certain amount of maturity necessary just to agree to sit down to do this. Or do you get people at the end of a long, wrangling court battle? I mean, where do you pick them up? What kind of people do you get coming into this very specialized and adult kind of service? Divorces aren't always adult, are they?
No, they're not. But I think that this actually, again, is one of the things that I think we do work toward, that this is not simply a legal issue to get a divorce, but how people go through it really makes a difference. And I think people going through mediation end up somewhat more intact at the end, and the family does as well. And I think that's... I guess one of the things that most intrigues me is it's not what kind of people we get per se, but the change in people in coming into mediation is what intrigues me. That is, I think we get all kinds of people who have come to mediation. We have people who have never been anywhere near the court process and don't know what's happening, people ending 20, 25-year marriages, kids basically who are 22 years old coming in. We also get people who've been involved in the courts for 2 years and don't have a settlement and have spent $10,000, $15,000. They still don't have a settlement, and at that point, they really are feeling desperate, and they come into mediation, and we're able to work with people at any point in the process if they're willing to come in and sit down and talk. The thing that's intriguing to me is that the very same people who have been filing motions at each other and calling the cops on each other and literally fighting with each other and getting involved in abuse are able, with some help, not only to stop that behavior or treat each other very formally, but often by the end of the mediation process, people are able to joke and kibitz with each other in a way that is very touching. And I think it's something that we don't acknowledge in this culture, that we tend to think that when people divorce, they're going to either have nothing to do with each other or hate each other, or else why would they be getting a divorce if they could get along? And I think one of the things that I've discovered in mediation and working with our mediation service is that people often have decided their marriage can no longer function, but they really want to be able to keep some kind of contact with each other, and it's important for them, and important for the adults as well as for the kids in the family. And I think in some ways mediation facilitates the possibility.
This process that goes on where you can remain friends and parents of your children together.
I think a lot of folks who start out with a divorce sort of forget that although you get the legal divorce, you may divorce each other as husband and wife. You don't divorce the children. And hopefully, with as many folks being divorced these days, as right now in the United States, I think a third of the children growing up in the United States are living with only a single parent, with one of the parents not there. And that's an extraordinary change in our society, and it means that in the face of the kind of divorce rate we have today, we really need to be able to think through, we're not simply stopping divorce, and we can't reverse that, but I think we do need to think through what happens to kids and families on the other side of divorce. The families, in fact, continue, and parenting continues, even though folks are divorced. And people say, well, how can you do it, and how can people work on an agreement together? They didn't work together in the marriage. But in fact, one of the things people run into is divorce doesn't settle a lot of the issues that people in some way hope they get away from. And a divorce is often the time when people do need to begin to work out some of those issues they could never resolve.
Well, just because people get divorced doesn't mean they've been bad parents or that they don't love their children. Well, and I think we forget that too.
I think that's true, and one of the places where that's most important is around the issue of we continue to have a fault divorce in Illinois, and we also have fights over custody, and those tend to be terribly destructive because the effect of focusing the issue around custody and visitation is to leave one parent feeling, as a father said the other day, it's kind of like I'm no longer the father, I'm disenfranchised. The kids get their suitcase and they come to visit me. I don't want to be visited. I'm their father. And I think that part of what's possible in mediation is, again, to be able to sit down with both parents and say, what is it that you folks want to do in terms of parenting with your children, and think about how you both can support access on the part of the kids to you each as parents, and to respect that. Because I think one of the things that's coming clearly through in research now on divorce is it's not divorce itself that's so destructive. People can manage to get through a divorce. It is what happens in the course of that divorce, and whether parents are demeaning and disparaging of each other as parents and are openly conflictual, or whether they're able to separate but nonetheless affirm each other as parents. That makes all the difference for kids.
I can imagine that children would have a big stake in what's going on here. This is something that's new, is it not? I mean, the whole concept divorce mediation service, is it just in the Chicago area? Are you the first, or?
No, the Divorce Mediation Service of the Pastoral Psychotherapy Institute, I believe, is the largest and longest running of the mediation services in the Chicago area. We have 18 mediators working with our service, and we have been running now for 2 years, but it is new. We are the longest running after 2 years. There are a good number of trained mediators in Illinois. There is, in fact, a Mediation Council of Illinois, and its phone number is 641-3000 for professionals who might be interested in working with mediation or information on that. But nationally, there are several groups that have organized mediators, and mediation really started about 1975 with a fellow named O.J. Kugler, who was an attorney down in Atlanta, who himself went through a very nasty divorce, and at the end of it felt that what he himself was doing, he felt there had to be a better way of doing this than what was going on, and developed mediation. And it took a while for it to catch on. As recently as 2 years ago, they had 100 members nationally, and that was all. In 1 year, that went from 100 to 1,000. And I think that that parallels another major change in our society, which I think is what's happening around parenting in divorce. Before 1980, I think there were less than 6 states that had any kind of legislation around joint custody. And since then, in just the last 2 years, there are now I think it's over 30 states that have some kind of legislation in relation to that. And I think the concern out of that, right here in Cook County, in fact, the Domestic Relations Division has instituted a mediation service for child custody cases. If there's a conflict over custody, folks now are referred to mediation. And I think this grows out of concern both on the part of society and on the part of parents as they see what's happening in divorce to kids, that there is some way that the kids don't get in the middle of this whole process, and that the parents are able to establish independent and separate lives, but that they both can still find a way of remaining available and affirming each other as parents for of the kids, because the kids need both parents.
Oh, I agree with you totally. Would you say then that the divorce mediation service is almost a development of society to meet the needs of single-parent families that are evolving? It's a transition. I hear you saying that just as people go into premarital counseling to find out what marriage is all about, that people, in a sense, go into divorce mediation to find out what life after divorce is all about, and how to keep it stable, how to keep it functioning, how to keep it going for the kids. Would that be a simple way of saying that?
Maybe a little bigger than what we do, but I'm willing to claim some of that. I think the part that I'd be willing to claim in that is that we, as I say, we don't just work out a legal settlement, but what we do, I think, with people is, instead of, as people often do, get caught locked into the past and, whose fault is it, or what are you going to give me to get out of this divorce, out of this marriage? Instead, we really try to help people look at their concrete needs for the future, each parent and the kids, and begin to work realistically around that. I think we also do have the kids in at the end of this and sit down and talk with them about what this means.
I was going to ask you whether kids ever came in and talked to you too.
After we work out an arrangement, we have the kids in. We find that very helpful. And again, that's something that when folks go through the adversarial process and see separate attorneys, there really isn't a context in which that happens, where the whole family has that kind of, it is a ritual occasion to sit down together and in a sense acknowledge the ending of one form of that family that isn't going to be anymore. And we have found that very helpful and enormously preferable to situations in which one parent is going in and telling the kids what happened and the other parent feels cut out and left out. We do, when you were thinking about what life is going to be like beyond this, one example that comes to mind for me is a couple we were working with in which when we started to work out the agreement, they thought they had things pretty well worked out, and the husband was going to move from the North Shore out to a western suburb because he was going to start a business there, and he was going to have his kids visit maybe one weekend, twice at the most in a month. And we sat down and talked through with them what they together wanted for parenting, and at the end of the process, they had completely changed where they were going. The husband had instead decided to buy a house and remain on the North Shore near his kids to work out, and since both parents were professionals, both were working, the wife was enormously relieved to be able to share really pretty equally the kind of time that they each had with the kids. and it made a tremendous difference with the kids. And that kind of thinking, slowing down and thinking through, I find people are really able to make use of.
Do you think sometimes that fathers are reluctant to assume that they can take care of children, or that the children will even want them to? Do you think there's kind of a bias in the society about children belong with their mothers, and that's very slowly changing? And would you say that protection of the father or the father's natural rights with the children was something you do?
I think much more what is we're running into is often both parents clearly feel strongly they want the child, and they're each afraid of a custody fight. It's like, if it's going to be a fight, I'll fight you. But neither of them really want that, and they know it would be destructive for the kids, and they both don't want to be cut out of parenting. And I think mediation is the ideal place for those kind of people to be able to work out the way in which they can both feel that the arrangements they have are best for their kids and fair with each other. I think one of the other things that I find with fathers is often they just kind of come up to divorce and maybe whatever. They may be, I think of another couple where at the point of divorce, the husband was really depressed and hadn't thought through a lot. He was just kind of going out and getting his garret apartment and eating takeout foods, and
because he thought he should,
and whatever.
Yeah.
And we talked about whether this was what, again, he really wanted in the kind of relation he wanted with his kids. And he said, as he thought about it, he realized he wanted to be more actively involved. And as we thought about that, he changed the place he got. People often do that, and I think, again, this is a place we help people. Instead of getting this kind of one-room, this studio, one-bedroom place he had where the kids were camping out in sleeping bags, we began to think about, well, if you really want to be involved, you need an apartment where there is a bedroom where the kids can feel like they have a place of their own. And he changed what he was doing, where he was living, and really felt quite differently out of that experience.
Would people who were about to become parts of other families, I'm talking about reconstituted families, reblended families, it would seem that it is conceivable that somebody sitting in front of, two people have to be sitting in front of you. It has to be the husband and the wife who are getting a divorce. You will not accept just one. Is that correct?
That's right. We really need both people.
You have to have both. That is the one prerequisite.
Yeah.
But let's say that we know that a husband and wife are sitting in front of you, and that one of them is going to be remarried, and that there are other children and another family involved. Would you continue in any way after the divorce was over, after whatever property, custody, legal issues, accounting issues, psychological issues about the divorce had been discussed? Would you then continue in terms of helping this husband and this wife, who are the parents of specific children, to continue to work out on their relationships to the children only? And
we haven't actually, I hear your question. We actually haven't been faced by that request at this point.
I have, but that's what I'm asking. No, I know people who continue to go back to court.
Yeah. Well, see, that's one of the things that's most interesting about what's going on with the present system. The present system, mediation in part is arising because the present system is not working. Not only is there this tremendous backlog, but furthermore, once you get a settlement, what I think folks don't realize is often they don't have a settlement. The statistics on non-compliance with support payments in the country are horrifying. The statistics on relitigation are horrifying. In both cases, within 2 years, this one study showed within 2 years, 80% of agreements were not being honored. What that means is that there are more cases, for instance, in Cook County back for post-decree relitigation than there are going through the first time. And I think one of the things that we're finding is there's a much higher compliance rate. That is, people, in fact, stick to and honor the agreements they themselves have worked out. And
so that the necessity of going back to the courts over and over again is less of that. I was going to ask you about costs, and it would seem that that's one of the benefits already, that you're going to certainly save certain kinds of legal and accounting and even therapist fees when you can agree on a settlement. There is a cost to the divorce mediation service. There's a time boundary usually?
We say that we work with 8 sessions. What that means is normally we expect we can get a settlement within 2 to 3 months rather than this going on for 6 months or a year and a half and everybody being up in the air as often happens. In terms of fees, because our divorce mediation service is part of a pastoral counseling center, we work on a sliding scale that's related to folks' income. We usually set that in the first session so that we're able to see people at whatever income range. We do have an orientation session for which we charge a flat $60 so people know what they're paying when they come in. I think that the benefits of mediation, I think I wouldn't want to urge mediation as a way to save money or to get a cheap divorce, because mediation also does cost money. I think, though, that what happens in terms of benefits to the family, to people having together laid a solid basis for a viable arrangement in the future, for having budgeted together, for having really worked through things with their kids, those are benefits that I think are, again and again, I think people have been grateful for.
It sounds like that would be a great deal to be grateful for. Perhaps we could tell people out there in the Chicago area, since we have about a minute left, where, again, they can contact you. You can do that directly in terms of phone number and what it is that people might very briefly expect when they contact you.
Sure. If you're interested in divorce mediation, you should call 312 area 696-6023. This is the Divorce Mediation Service of the Pastoral Psychotherapy Institute of Parkside Human Services. If you call, we will send you an application and our brochures, and those you can share with your spouse. Then we would sit down and schedule an appointment with you and see you for an orientation session where you can make a decision whether this is for you. Again, the phone number is 696-6023.
Thank you very much, Carl. I know that a lot of people have learned a great deal out there. This is Audrey Gordon for Sunrise Sunset, the Jewish Family in Transition. Thank you very much.